Let me go ahead and do the thing here real quick, and then I'll formally get into the thing. Um, okay. So, slideshow. There we go. This is where we are. And thank you all for coming back. And I do see a few new names, at least for me, probably not for you all. So I'll just introduce myself, and then if you want to um, say hello or even just put your name in the chat, you can do that too. But so I'm Josh Metz with the RGS team, and we're working on a contract with Northwest
North Edge.
North Edge, previously Arcade Economic Development Corporation, in support of the RISE effort, and with a focus on this funding and finance capacity building effort. And so we facilitate these monthly regular meetings, and in between those meetings, the pretty much regular now expert session deep dives into topics of interest for the group. And we've been doing this since I think January, and have a body of information on the website for RISE, which maybe Abigail, you can put in the chat for anyone who maybe have not been to one of these meetings before. Maybe that's a way to go. Raise of hands, who has been to one of these, who has not been to one of these meetings before? Maybe that's the best way to go. Not seeing any hands raised, so okay. Well then, won't do too much more background than that. We have a variation on what we've been doing up to now in the beginning of these sessions, which really is reflective of the work of the sector tables and their advancing of the strategies that have now been all delivered to the RISE team. And we wanted to take the first part of these meetings as a chance for the folks who worked on those strategies to give a brief on what the main outcomes were. And so Marianne Petrillo, who has been leading the Blue Economy and in collaboration, the Working Lands group with her collaborator there, has graciously volunteered to be the first one to talk about the Blue Economy strategy. And so we'll take the first 30 minutes of this meeting, probably 15-20 minutes of talking, and then some Q&A if there are those. Or I think Marianne, you can tell us whether you would like us to hold questions till the end or just raise them while you're going along. But we have about a half an hour on the agenda to talk about this good work. And with that, I will stop sharing and pass to you, Marianne, to take it up and advance the slides through your topic.
Great, happy to. And thank you, Susan and Josh, for inviting me to this. It's always great. It's gotten to be really more and more fun talking about the Blue Economy and talking about the sector table work. I'm pleased to see Calder and Sabrina on here, some of my colleagues who are also leading some of the other tables. And I think, I could say this on behalf of everybody, as hard as the work was, and sometimes there were some dark moments that we all went through, it was really nice to get to the finish line. And, we're definitely much more knowledgeable about the sectors as a whole. And I think we're all very eager to see this continue in a positive way, because it really has legs. It's a lot of times we all work on projects that we don't know where it's going to head, but seeing these strategies come together has been very rewarding. So just wanted to give that as a heads up. And I'm, again, Mary Ann Petrillo, CEO of West Business Development Center. Most of you know me, but I'll just start out with that. Let's see if I can get into presentation mode. Okay. Just get my slides working. Give me a second here. I think my slides are advancing. Maybe you should do it because for some reason they're not advancing the way they should. Josh,
Okay,
have you tried
I'll,
coming up? So let me stop sharing and you go ahead.
okay, let me do that again here. Boom.
So for most of you, I'll go ahead and start talking about it as Josh is advancing it. As you all know, we have been, like all the other sector tables, gathering people together who are knowledgeable about this particular area around the blue economy, which really encompasses a wide array of the way the economy is supported by the oceans and the waterways that's in our region. I think it's really important to realize that we have a 280 miles of coastline that really plays that very significant role in economic growth. A lot of times we think of Southern California as, you know, being the place that has big ports and lots of industry, but the Northern California coastline, in addition to its beauty, really is the livelihood for many, 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 many people. And it's a generational and legacy tradition of working and living and having thriving waterfronts on the Northern California coast. So with that in mind, keep in mind that those are key industries. We did, of course, like everyone else, a SWOT analysis. I've just pulled out a couple of things. I've pulled out kind of like the challenges, the threats, the weaknesses, and then I'll share a little bit about the opportunities. But I think one thing we who are on the coast and have worked in this arena are really maybe keenly knowledgeable about is the severe impact that climate change has had on our oceans. I mean, we see it in Fort Bragg. It's the core of what the Noyo Science Center has been working on with the depletion of oak kelp and the rise of the purple urchins. It's devastated our oceans in so many different ways. Compounded to that, of course, is the issues with fishing, commercial fishing closures of different fisheries, regulatory challenges, permitting delays. And one of the things that came up for the group when we were doing this is what I'm calling here a misalignment of regulations. Nobody in the group was, we don't want to be regulated. We understand the value of it, but how do you align regulations so that they could also foster economic gains at the same time as supporting issues around, you know, ecology and ecological challenges. So it's a really challenging environment to work. But on the same hand, it has a lot of opportunity when you have something like that. Next slide, please. And, you know, this is where, you know, was really the exciting part was when we were all together and realizing what a strong commercial fishing network really does exist up and down the coast. And the commercial fishing men and women in general are very well connected to each other. They understand some of the challenges. They're very knowledgeable about the sustainability issues. I mean, it's, you know, I wish I could have bottled some of those conversations because they were very, very enlightening about how that industry operates and understanding how they've overcome some of these challenges. But, you know, this is where we really need to make some significant investments now in infrastructure as well as in expanding marketplaces. But the other interesting opportunities we have in the blue economy are the research institutions, not only Cal Poly, but with the work of the rise of the Neuroscience Center. It would give a big boost to the economy if those two institutions, and even going south through Sonoma and Bodega Bay, all begin to really work on some of the environmental challenges of the day and support marine-based research. We also are seeing a lot of young innovators coming in. In addition to this particular report, Wes was involved in a report that was funded by EDF with the Neuroscience Center, and it was specifically around the possibilities of blue economy incubators and accelerators and what that could look like along our coast. So that isn't part of this, but it's related to and is being considered as a document worth investigating. So these accelerators could be focused on young innovators who really understand the ecosystem and understand the stewardship that's needed to bolster the economy with some new products. And then finally, and of course more importantly, is we have ancestral knowledge. We talk about the commercial fishing, but we also have a big tribal communities up and down the coast, which we need to make sure that as we are evolving our economy through marine sciences, that we tap into this traditional wisdom and practices. So that was the background and the basis, along with the work that CCLP has given us. And one of the first things the group did early on was craft a vision statement, which we believe and continue to hold true, which is that the Redwood region is poised to become a global leader in rural regenerative blue economies. To achieve this, we will form collaborative networks of stakeholders to advocate for policy and investment, drive innovative technologies, revitalize infrastructure, create robust and expanded markets, and advance ocean water research. Each of those words were chosen very intentionally, and you'll see it roll out over the next few slides. Next slide. So again, through lots of various meetings that we had, we came up with four strategies. Each of these are intertwined with the other, so it's not really a matter of hierarchical strategies, but really they need to all go together. One is champion advocacy, and some of you know me, I think this is really important for all the industries and all the sector tables, that people know what is going on in the North Coast and the Redwood region. But I think in terms of the blue economy, there is so much regulation that is put upon these industries that if we really want to see the economy flourish in this industry, we're going to have to advocate for a better alignment of how those policies need to work, and the rapidness of getting permits and the importance of that is just so essential. I can't say enough about that. Expanding markets is, of course, you'll see that in almost all of our strategies for sure, because we really are trying, and we're actively trying right now, all of us up and down the coast, on helping our commercial fishing fleet, especially, expand their markets and shorten that supply chain. Advancing ocean and water research is going to be key, whether it's researching waterways and improving the qualities of rivers and streams throughout our Fort County region, or it's talking about marine and ocean specific research. This is stuff that is going to really help advance issues around climate change. So we can do it fast enough. And I mean, that's one of the things that most researchers is a big concern. And then driving innovation. This is true throughout all of California, but I think on our North Coast, we see it in fits and starts and small communities. But what we don't do is we don't see it happen in clusters. Now, with the advent of offshore wind and the work that's being done in Humboldt, that is going to have that's going to be a huge catalyst for all the counties. And I think we're all realizing that. Sometimes you can look at it good and bad, but it really, as far as innovation, it opens the door for people, individuals, and innovators to come into our rural region, as well as foster the next generation of innovators who live here right now, to see that there are opportunities in this blue economy industry that, you know, their parents and their grandparents never even thought of. So these are the strategies that are core to the whole document. Next slide. These are some goals and tactics, and so these are a little more short-term, shortening the supply chain, creating market demand, and investments in the coast. You can see here, there are some key things, obviously direct to retail sales, and, you know, Humboldt's working on it, Crescent City is working on it. Things are happening in Mendocino County as far as dockside sales and stuff. Cold storage and processing is really being advanced now up and down the coast, because it is going to be essential for our working waterfronts to have that, as well as distribution and co-packing. The market demand is something, again, I talk about this in the context of the blue economy, but you can apply this to almost every sector, right? We need to tell our regional story, whatever sector we're in. We need to be making sure that we're seeking out, you know, buyers for our products and services, and they know that it's coming from this region, and the kinds of products and services that we can offer are unique to this region, and therefore important to the overall economy, and creating community markets in the sense of that's very important for the commercial fishing and working waterfronts. And then investments in the coast and investments in our region. We need port infrastructure. You know, Humboldt is already experiencing that, and they're on their way. But places like Fort Bragg, Crescent City, we still have a long way to go, and sea level rise and some of the other degradations that are happening from climate change are happening faster than the permitting and the funding will allow us to get infrastructure in. So these are very, very important components, and tied together with the infrastructure, of course, is the permitting process. All of these things go hand in hand. I would say that if there was one thing that was highlighted in this document, is the fact of how they are all interrelated. And so we really do need to support that. And the entrepreneurial development is only going to happen as some of these other things begin to really advance. Because that's what's really going to begin to spark your entrepreneurs, either those who live and work here currently or entrepreneurs coming into the region. They want to know that there's an ability for them to grow their product, design their service, and create something new. That, again, we are nothing if not thoughtful, sustainable, regenerative. So those individuals who are coming here to be the new entrepreneurs are coming here with that mindset. And that's a really strong advance for us and unique to our region. Next slide. I don't think I have anything else. Oh, and then one of the things we chose to do in our projects, in our strategy, is we chose to highlight some transformational projects. By no means are these the projects of choice. I want to clarify that. We're calling them transformational projects because if we get a $40 million science center built on the coast, that's like a big project. That's going to change a lot of things in the area, in the region. Same with an aquaculture innovation center. If you really launch something like that. So what we chose to do in our strategy document is to highlight some of these. And again, they're not the exclusive ones. They're by no means the exhaustive list of projects that were applied for Catalyst funds, but it was a way to make the strategy document real. Because all the things that are in the strategy document, if we're not addressing them, none of these transformational projects will be able to happen and come to fruition. And that's my quick overview. We just have the last slide.
That was great. Yeah.
To answer questions or
I
expand.
I have a question just operationally. Are you guys seeing a spinning red thing in the corner?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize for that. Let me stop sharing and refresh because I got kind of hung up here. I was
I'm trying
wondering.
not to do the cat thing and just keep moving my head around to follow it.
I'm sorry. Oh, jeez. Okay. So distracting. Oh, it's still there. Look at that. Okay. Okay. I got something going on my desktop. Carry on with the conversation. See what I can fix here.
Any questions about it? No. We tapped into Amanda a million times in the course of that. She exhibits great patience.
Hey, Mary Ann, this is Dana. Nice to see you again. Can you remind me the dates of your Blue Economy Summit?
So we're not having the summit in September as planned.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna have it, we will be having a Noyo Harbor Festival on the 23rd of September. It's that Saturday. I have to look.
Okay.
But for a whole host of reasons, the end of September, a lot of people were still in transition. One of the things that we want to do is finish the operational plan for the Noyo Center so that we have that as a display and do some of the advanced work that we're planning to do on the revitalization of the harbor. So I think what we're going to do is postpone it to the spring.
Okay.
Right?
Thanks for that. Josh, can I do a follow-up question? I'm going to pivot over to Susan and Amanda. Is that okay?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Hello, team. I haven't seen you in a very long time. My question is the style of content, the way Mary Ann presented it. I'm curious if that is reflective of how all of the sector tables did their work also, and how it might look coming in the door August 30th.
Great question. And I need to, once again, more props to Mary Ann and her colleagues as the sector table leads for just being such collaborators, just reaching out for each other, bringing each other up and along. I think they all met we had a little cohort and then also separately to harmonize the format. Of course, they began their work. They were, I think, Dana, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the early working groups out of the gate. We formed them in December and, worked as hard as we could to get the contracting done, which means that they all had to do their work before you guys released your outline for our deliverable. So there's going to be a little bit of translation work to be done, but we love the format. We think it makes it really tangible for our region. And so we'll preserve those aspects in our engagement with our broader collaborative. Does that sound like a good approach?
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. As Mary Ann was going through it, I had in the back of my mind how our consulting team that is going to be brought on to help with the state's operational plan, how they would be reading that and how they would be interpreting that. And we're going to be pulling that kind of insight and data and narrative. We're going to be pulling from these regional presentation or regional strategies. And I was imagining how they would be responding and seeing something like this and being able to, quickly pull out some key points and for some follow-up. So I think it's great. And it looked good.
I will say, Dana, that and echo what Amanda said, we all worked individually, and then shortly after a few sessions, then the sector tables came together, and it was clear that we had to all have sort of a structure. Now, granted, they're very different sectors, so you couldn't be one for one exclusively. But if you're trying to look at that as a framework, you want to know what your strategy is, what your objectives are, what your vision is, and then what are all the different elements that have to be rolled out. And then, if this was going to be continuing, then you would go into your execution mode where you're going to execute in year 1, year 2, year 3, and so on.
Got it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'll just add, since we're just a little less than a month away, I would be remiss if I didn't remind, if go back and revisit the original SFP for the regional strategy, because there are some key elements to be delivered in that regional strategy. And I think you heard Derek say this yesterday on the community of practice. It's not so much the gloss that we're looking for, but we're looking for those key elements defined in the SFP, and the content, the narrative that goes with that. So just a reminder, if you haven't already done it, maybe another exercise to build in before August 30th or deliverable date is, let's go back and review the SFP elements to ensure that they are in there. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. And yeah, I'll just add a few things because, I've been playing a bit of a supportive role on the blue economy theme for several years, and had the chance to work with Sheba Person-Whitley, who was just here from the EDA and come through both Bodega and then up through Fort Bragg and then up to your Power CA event. And I think the 280-mile coastline of the Redwood region is notable. The reality of the fishing and the blue economy operations are that they occur much longer distances, and so this interesting artifact of the blue economy as a thing is that it's it extends pretty much from Seattle to San Diego, at least in on the west coast of the US up into Alaska, obviously, and then beyond. So it's quite a large accessible marketplace, especially transporting goods and so forth. And I just think that's a unique characteristic of that sector that makes it especially valuable from an economic development perspective. And so yeah, I think that was my main point, just to keep that in mind. Really, really nicely organized and well done, Marianne. You have another point.
Yeah, I have another point because you reminded me something just as you were speaking. So I mentioned about those transformational projects. Remember, it's always good to visualize. You can visualize a building, like you get it. You can visualize, research and stuff. You can get it. There is one thing that fundamentally, and in the later part of this, and I emphasize, I put it in, it's in the strategy document, but it's not really highlighted, and I want to call attention to it, is that getting a seawater intake is one of the core needs of our region in Fort Bragg. There is one in Humboldt and one in Morro Bay, and no place else. And without a seawater intake, well, you can do a lot without it, but with a seawater intake, that's when you're going to be able to do the research, the innovators, the businesses. And right now, the first phase is understanding from a feasibility standpoint what type of seawater intake we are able to do. But that is going to be one of the things that we're all starting to rally. I went up and down the coast and asked everybody if this was worthwhile to everybody. And it was, because then when it's there, when it's in a community, we have one in Humboldt, have one in another community, you're able to do more with entrepreneurs and innovators, and you're able to do more with research. So just something to keep in mind, but it's not as exciting as a building. Building is nice to think about, but But this is one of those infrastructure needs, along with, repairing the wharfs and, repairing seawalls and things. But it does stimulate entrepreneurs. So that's all.
Yeah. Yeah, we heard that when you mentioned the Blue Economy Learning Festival that happened a couple years back. That was really quite a dynamic and cool event. But one of the things that happened was a Zoom in session from this group out in Hilo, Hawaii, who have a large aquaculture center there. I think it's part of NOAA or one of the federal agencies. And really that establishing the intake of the seawater and setting up the pads basically for the aquaculture operations to just plug in. That was, the key sort of gating mechanism to open up. Then they had places for companies to come and locate. And that's what we heard from the people down in San Diego. Paula down there was saying, we've got people spinning out of our accelerator program with nowhere to go or grow. And so if they, even as far up as Mendocino, if they had facilities like that, that would be really compelling. And so I know that's the same, for Humboldt's got some of that infrastructure, and there is a big aquaculture project, being advanced there, but just having those ready to go sites with that key infrastructure, that's really critical piece to making that happen. So I know we have to move along. Greg's got your hand up, and then we can move along to Amanda's piece.
Well, and this might transition into Amanda a little bit. And we talked about this the other day, which is with the current and projected budget deficits the state of California, which if you look at the NASDAQ the last couple of days, Amanda gave a great presentation on what's driving growth and productivity in California. It was basically two counties, which are very tech heavy, San Mateo and Santa Clara. So that being said, is there work, Marianne, and maybe the other sector table folks on creating some sort of advocacy partnership through this to start addressing some policy issues that we might have going forward, or fixing even at the regulatory level? Because I think that our asks for funding may be going on. We'll get that. We'd love to help you for the next 3 or 4 years, but we can't. But I think there are some significant policy stuff that could come out of this region that maybe we can get some traction on, and that might be more effective, I hope, in the shorter term than the money asks. And as we know, the state often throws a little bit of money at issues that are created by state policy. So they throw $1 trillion roadblock and throw $1 billion at it to try to get us past it. And in particular, I'll think of one example, which is a great program, the Carl Moyer Grant Program, which is trying to deal with Air Resource Board regulations around repowering fishing boats. But it only pays for the motor. It doesn't pay for the installation and everything else, which can be also tens of thousands of dollars more. And it only pays on a reimbursement basis. So, the State Resources Board creates this issue, which is you have to repower your boats, and throws a very imperfect support at trying to do it. And so you have a fisherman that says, I can't run my boat past a certain date, and I have to come up with $50,000 to $100,000 out of my pocket for after grant expenses or non. So anyway, things like that. I'm just wondering if there's going to be a across the 4 sectors, or even across the entire region, a legislative advocacy platform that we can come up with. Okay, that's my only question. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion, and especially for the blue economy, it may be a thing that extends, like we said, well beyond the Redwood region. But I would think that there would be a place for that.
I'd like to, I wouldn't mind stepping in here. That's what I would like to see in terms of the long-term work of this collaborative, would be that every few years we have the collaborative agree on a policy statements that we want to advocate for as a region. And we're working on a special workshop now to help people learn how to become better advocates. So you'll be hearing about that very, very soon.
Okay, we got one more question, I guess. Calder?
Oh, well, yeah, I actually not a question. I just wanted to chime in really quick to lift up what Greg just said. Yeah, absolutely. Advocacy and legislative responses, I think, are incredibly important and a huge part of the puzzle, as opposed to just asking for more money, which may be rather hard to come by. I mean, particularly, I know that in arts, culture, and tourism, we do have some legislative asks, so to speak, that have been integrated into the strategies. And interesting enough, like are oriented around insurance actually in the state. But I mean, I think every sector certainly has different legislative priorities that we want to push forward, and definitely strong agree with that approach for sure. Also, just while I have the mic, I just want to lift up Marianne's presentation. It's awesome. It's really great. It's been really a pleasure working with you and continue working with you in the future as we go, hopefully. And just really Marianne's commitment to making sure that all of us, we're having the same kind of like just on the same page, right? Just like, and I just, it was a unified, felt like, so you could read every document, felt like you were reading chapter 1 through 5 of the same document, and I really appreciate that approach, and it's been a joy. So yeah, just want to say that.
It's fun working with you guys, so it was a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Can't raise my hand or anything. This is Sabrina. But I also wanted to expand this a little bit, because we talked about identifying issues that we face as a rural geographic area in California. And I think that's important, but also just an advocacy for the fact of a rural California, that there is a rural California that isn't necessarily inherently thriving agriculture, because I know that certain kinds of agriculture get notice, but I also feel like we get lost in the shuffle in most conversations happening at a state level. I compare what I notice here from when I lived in the Bay Area, for example, and it's much harder to get representation, to get information, to keep jumping up and saying, us too, don't forget. So that advocacy is more generally about living in a rural area than as well as specific issues. I won't compete them. They're both important.
Excellent. Well, this would be a good point to pass the mic to Amanda if she wanted to say anything there in response, or simply take on the next phase of the day's agenda.
Yeah, well, just thank you all so much. Just I really appreciated your note at the top, Marianne, about we're jazzed, we've got legs, let's keep going, because that's the perfect lead in to mine. My updates on Catalyst, and I did want to just quick stack on Sabrina's point, which is when we prepared regional plan part 1, the fact that most of our, when we provide data comparisons, we provide them for the Redwood region, rural California, and California at large. And that was not accident. That was exactly with this conversation in mind around advocacy. Yeah, really excited to see how we can grow our voice and grow our power, and how we can assist you all in that. So with that, I'll give everyone a little update, because we are at a transition moment, though Dana was very right to point out that it is a final sprint to get our regional roadmap completed and get the draft submitted to the state on August 30th. There are still key parts requirements in that SFP that are very much in draft form. So my team is focused on that, number 1. But I do want to pop my head up a bit and show you all what comes next, so that none of it is too much of a surprise. And I know several of you have been following, but let's just get right into it. So I believe I have this laid out on a timeline. Like I said, we'll submit our regional roadmap, that's plans part 1 and 2, to the state on August 30th. We'll have a month to do maybe some light revisions and certainly some copy editing and graphic design. And then the period of performance for Redwood Region Rise planning phase officially ends end of September. Catalyst phase, our wonderful fiscal agents, AADC, have been under contract for the Catalyst phase, which is what keeps us in the mix, keeps us convening, keeps the collaborative going, and gets us doing pre-development work. CCRP is not yet under contract for that, but we did attend orientation on July 1st, so momentum is building and we are getting ready to do that work. Catalyst keeps our collaborative together from now through October 2026. That's the period of performance. I'm going to walk us through the buckets of funds, the different buckets in that Catalyst budget. They were prescribed by the state. And we'll go through kind of what all of those are in just a minute. And those $9 million of pre-development stage projects that we've done a lot of speaking on is included in that. I do also want to flag, we've heard now multiple times that the implementation funding opportunity that's for shovel-ready projects is on its way. The latest is that it's coming in quote unquote early September. And we will be asked to submit projects by November. We'll get into that. And the big news that we received yesterday, and they really buried the lead on this one, but was that the tribal opportunity did end up getting cut in the budget. And we were not able to track it. Of course, we were paying attention to different buckets and we were asking a lot of questions, but somehow we are learning of this after the governor signed, that it is reduced to 15 million from 25 million to 15 million. But the public comment period will open it in quote the next few months, end quote. So that was a bit of a disappointment yesterday. Next slide, please, Josh. So here's just to lay out what this transition looks like, because we do have a little bit of an overlap period between the two phases of the grant. There was that official release of Roadmap Part 1 back end of June. We are currently bringing all these great strategies that the sector tables have completed, along with drafts of some of the cross-sector strategies, out to community over the course of the last, the next 3 weeks effectively, get feedback, plug any gaps, identify any assets that we may not have, and do that basically community sense making and consensus building around these strategies. And then once again, that roadmap will be sent to the state August 30th and finalized in September. In the meantime, we're prepping. So we're working through our own internal contracting to shift over from planning into implementation or into the Catalyst grant. And the exciting first thing to be on the lookout for is going to be an RFP for sector coordinators who are key positions in implementing these strategies. They carry forward this beautiful foundation set by Calder, Sabrina, Marianne, and their colleagues, Jessica at the Health Table, Lacey over in Renewable Resilient Energy. The voting members we'll ask them to form a committee in early August to evaluate the proposals. And then we'll, ask folks in for a brief interview and hope to have the sector coordinator selected around the same time that we're finalizing our roadmap. And from there, we turn our attentions to project funding. Next slide, please. So I know I've walked through this with some folks again, some folks before, but I do think it bears mention because it is difficult to keep these pots straight. We'll have these materials available for folks, and we have distributed them before. But once again, when it comes to the different pots of funding, Catalyst helps us develop a pipeline of projects aligned with community priorities, that pre-development work. But it's also got a bunch of the convening stuff in it too. So what is it? It's $2 million to keep the collaborative going, and that includes facilitation support for the tables, the backbone support work that my team does, and continued outreach and engagement in community. $1.5 million towards those sector investment coordinators that are those key positions that get us implementing this plan. 1.5 million keeps AEDC with us and going, administration and compliance. And then once again, that $9 million in project pre-development activities that our voting members will have to make some tough decisions how to allocate through the fall of this year. Implementation, that's once again for those shovel-ready projects that are aligned with the regional strategy. And there's 5 broad and at times overlapping categories of things that it'll fund: innovation ecosystem, entrepreneurship and access to capital, infrastructure, community facility development, social infrastructure, and workforce development. Next slide. They work a little differently. So Catalyst, all the funds come through the convener. This is a place where our region is fully directing the way these resources are used. So projects, they should align with the jobs first priorities of equity, sustainability, and job quality, and adhere to federal and program specific like Justice 40 guidelines. And that's built into our preliminary rubric draft, which we're still elaborating for use on those Catalyst projects. We will also be forming a scoring committee to help look at those projects and evaluate them for alignment with our stated values and goals. The state has already provided those recommended guidelines. We've distributed them and continue to make them available. They will not have approval. That's your voting members who are going to have final approval on the slate of projects. We're looking for 5 to 10 projects to invest that $9 million in. And we have been provided with some general guidance on scoring processes, for example, that committee that I mentioned. Implementation funding works totally different. So the state will release SFP. I believe they said it's going to stay open. So I think it's a rolling situation. Actually, Dana, am I misrepresenting that? I heard them say it'll stay open and not close and reopen with the different budget fiscal years, but I don't know how that works. Okay.
Yeah, and really quick, how that'll work. It'll be rolling. There will be what we are calling review dates. So the first tranche of applications that come in, I think November 1st is the first review date. So all the applications that came in between the release of the SFP and that November 1st, they will be reviewed. And then applications that start to come in November 2nd and up to the next review date, they will be reviewed. So that's like it's a rolling application process, and we're calling them review dates.
Review dates, that's great language to have. Thank you, Dana. So once again, there'll be an SFP. It'll include the rubric. We got yesterday a preview of some of the requirements for capital projects that we'll have to really demonstrate at a high level that they are ready to go. They are in fact shovel ready. And the role that our collaborative plays in this process is that the voting members will provide endorsement letters to those projects. So that that all the application goes directly to the state, but we do provide that. I don't know how many. Originally it was going to be 5 projects, but that's before we had the different review dates. So sorry, Greg, I'm going to throw your question to Dana as well. Dana, feel free to pass if this hasn't been set yet. But are we still looking to submit 5 implementation projects?
The last that I heard coming out of the SFP is that there's not a number to be restricted on the implementation projects.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you.
And that's reflective of the fact that the amount of funding that's been made available is different than it was originally. But you should, it will clearly be defined in the SFP when it gets released, but we're not, and Greg, it's a really good question. There is no guarantee that this is distributed a percentage to each region or anything like that. That is not a part of what this program outlines. It's about being ready and how it scores. So it's competitive across the board.
Thank you, Dana. And the first tranche there is 50 million, as I understand it. Next slide. So this is really, really important, is understanding these sector investment coordinators, these key roles that are taking the lead on building our capacity, on looking to leverage funding and resources. There's basically 6 components to their role, and this was prescribed in the Catalyst program. So they're working with the collaborative to develop those priority industries that are in those sectors. They're going to help catalog projects that support growth of the prioritized industries and enhance high quality job creation. And they'll also be assessing the projects for readiness so that we can strategically route them to the different the pools of funding, and also be looking to other sources as well, working with our wonderful GoBiz staff and regional partners to find those other sources of funding, state, federal, and private grants, leveraging philanthropy, all that good stuff, aligning projects with federal funding. And some of that really is baked in when you see things like Justice 40 in the criteria, and holding up things like PLAs and CBAs, things that we are seeing be requirements in federal funding applications that are also included as requirements in California Jobs First implementation funding. Liaising and connecting across the region for workforce and economic development. Some high road training partnerships. I've only been able to identify 2 so far in Humboldt. If you know any more of those, please let me know, that are active. Community-based organizations and others to build an ecosystem and strengthen the partnerships around those great initiatives and projects, and providing technical assistance for grant applications. So they're really the key implementers of all of this. And I think, did I put any preview of the RFP? Next slide. Oh yeah, just some next steps. So, focus on getting that RFP out, on recruiting those sector coordinators and getting them onboarded so we can really launch this work in earnest. And then we will turn our attention, of course, to picking up where we left off on the $9 million, getting out to the region. We're going to need, advisors to help create an accessible application, working with the nice foundation that we've set in our project inventory, finalizing that scoring rubric that we have a draft of, and getting our committees together to do that scoring. And of course, finalizing our process for voting on that final slate of projects. We did make some staff recommendations to our voting members when we did a presentation on this, around considering multiple disbursements and considering evaluating applications for financial mechanisms first. These are some of the considerations that we need to work through to get a process that makes sense. And thankful to have all of you as thought partners, and of course RGS in their role here in the Economic Development Finance Working Group to help us create a process that elevates feasible projects that are likely to succeed. So thank you all for being along for that, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Amanda? You knocked him dead here, so.
Or boredom dead, unclear which. I wanted to highlight Marianne's comment about the threshold for shovel. Yes, it's like literally shovel ready is literally shovel ready. It's a challenge for all the rural regions. I do believe that there were some rural regions who didn't have projects awarded in the pilot phase. So yeah, it's a thing.
My concern about that was, even if we got all of those permits in the next 2 years, and that's, I say that with great caution.
Yeah.
Maybe a project would be eligible for year 3. But what I know about permits, I mean, permits could take 5 years. It's not even.
I would expect that any project that's not like totally ready is gonna have a hard time competing with the state, because it's a statewide competitive set for that implementation money.
Yeah, and I'll say so you didn't see us really scrambling around too much until we had more kind of information, because it did feel like not the ripest opportunity for a region, though I do want to elevate that. A lot of that difficulty is for projects that have a capital component to them, that do have to do some sort of construction or get a site, and we have a fair amount of initiatives that don't require that. So I'm still waiting to see the finalized criteria, to Greg's point, for those projects. But that might be where some of the best opportunities for us may be. And over to you, Layla.
Thank you, Amanda. We're not struck dumb, blind, or bored. This is an extraordinary amount of detail and dynamics to juggle. I'm so grateful it's you, and thank you for that. My question is one that we have begun to talk about, but I'm curious if you'd advance your thinking. I'm assuming that you're going to want people to step up and help with some of these design elements, especially around the Catalyst Fund, bringing on the sector coordinators. What kind of help are you hoping for?
Thank you so much, Layla. We were very much hoping that you and your fellow community foundations folks with that philanthropic experience could help us think through some of the design of the formal application process, to make it not onerous, to make it work for folks. And like I said, we will be asking to form a committee to help review the RFPs, a committee, of course, that will exclude any voting members who may be applying for the RFP as another step. And we are in process of seating an executive board for the voting members, which is going to help all of this immensely, because yes, our staff here at CCRP needs a lot of guidance to execute these steps in ways that are inclusive and make sense to people. So yeah, we'll talk about that August 6th at the voting members meeting.
Amanda, I have a question that may or may not be answered, but did you say the $9 million catalyst money for the projects? Did I hear you say like 9? Was there a set amount that you already know that's going to be awarded? Like you can only do X amount of awards, or how is that?
Yeah, I've been wondering that for a while, and I can't remember where I heard it first, but one of our state partners did say 5 to 10 projects. So that is the guidance. It's not a hard and fast rule to my understanding.
Right. So my question is, is it better to see smaller projects all over to get multiple things started, or is it better to group some of these things together under one and get it bigger? It's just something that it'll be good to know when the time comes.
Oh, totally, Marianne. I feel you. We have about 120 projects, most of which are way too small. So there is some aggregating, but have many themes and potential right partnerships that could be brought together. So we are doing just starting that work this month. And I think Susan, you wanted to jump in on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that logistically, another thing we're not totally sure about, but being able to get the money out, we have to front it and get reimbursed by the state. So we have to figure out how to balance it so that we're getting out projects and chunks that we can handle. So that's just going to be another factor in it, but we'll make it work. We have some different options.
Right. And are you going to do the groupings, or is that something that the sector investment needs would help group projects together?
Great question. Because that having these, like, I'm calling them investment areas, Marianne, where I sort of theme things together. It's useful for regional plan part 2. So we're doing effectively a preliminary cut of it here in-house, but anticipating it's constantly evolving. So once we have those investment coordinators, we'd hand it over to them to take forward. Greg?
This is where I get to be the old grumpy with a lot of wisdom, if that's what that is. So, I was over here looking at the relative populations of the 13 regions, and the good news is that we're not the smallest. That would be the Eastern Sierra. But we are the second smallest with 324,000 people in our region. So we represent maybe 1% of the entire population of the 13 regions. And as Marianne knows, and what you were talking about earlier, Marianne, is there's so little money now. And in fact, even when it was a lot more, there was so little money that I always felt like the rhetoric was misaligned with the actuality of what the state was providing in this whole process, the SURF process. And so am I just whining? No, I think partly, but I think we need to face reality that there's a very good chance that we get nothing in this region. Probably a very good chance. And so I'm hopeful that we can pivot off of some of that and say, well, at least we spent a lot of time in this process. We need to then figure out what we do with that. And that's going to be the sort of hang together, hang separately thing. There's a lot of great rhetoric in this process, but the reality is there wasn't enough money to do anything really meaningful across the regions at 600 million. That's 30 times more true at 50. And so,
can I just say that's why this group exists, is because
well,
we recognize that.
and that's what I'm saying. So I think that we talk a lot about projects, and those are all good in these plans. And when we talk forward, and we're waiting for the state criteria about how to apply and stuff, but I think there's a whole nother piece of that we can do that's even outside of this, which is like, okay, so that being true, how do we create something that and I don't know what that is other than a strong advocacy piece. But I put the LAO report in the chat. If you really want to see, some pain going forward, look at that. We will have an administration change, of course, in the 2 years. So, yeah, let's not only look at projects, or let's look at projects, but with an eye to how other ways we might be able to fund them, which I know is a big part of the topic. But also, how do we hang together past this as a region and really focus on the advocacy? Because I think we need to be very clear-eyed that if 13 proposals come in, scrambling for, one from each region, scrambling for $50 million, it's going to be Kern, maybe the Inland Empire, LA, and the Bay Area that's going to get it, because they can also show greater numbers, right? We may have a lot of poverty, but they have a lot of poverty too, and more people in it. And so I think that's where you're going to start, that's going to be one of the criteria is how many people are affected by these projects. So that's not a doom and gloom. That's a call to action, and I'm hopeful that's something we can keep on. And I've been again and I was very young when I started this, by the way, Josh. So I'm not that old now, but I remember doing this with the aerospace crash after the Cold War ended, and the Southern California aerospace crash, and then the .com, and then the financial collapse in the mid aughts. And so it's such an interesting story and song, because it repeats itself. And after a few times of doing this, maybe we figure out, we gotta get smarter about how we react. I don't know. Anyway, this is my soapbox day. I started off with a lot of caffeine, and that's where I am.
Thank you, Greg. Anna, you're following Greg.
I am following Greg, and I'm okay with that. But he hits on a couple of points that I think are really important. Number one, let's remember why Catalyst is called what it is. It's intended to be a catalyst for getting some projects up and ready, up off the ground, ready to go. Number two, from the very beginning, and Greg is absolutely right, from the very beginning, $600 million was not a lot of funding. And it's been stated multiple times throughout the process. And I've said this, you know, bluntly to a lot of the regions I interface with. Don't look down at the $600 million. We need to be looking out ahead of the other funding streams that are coming in, particularly with an eye towards the federal government, and understanding what some of those opportunities are that keep coming out. Almost, I feel like every week we're getting some announcements on this. So, Greg, oh, then the third piece I wanted to add, when I said competitive around the implementation funding, it's competitive to how you're scoring against the scoring rubric. You're not competing. They're not an application. Your application is not going to be held up to somebody else's application. You're going to be scored on how the application meets the rubrics as they're defined in the scoring criteria. So it's not you're going to pit against a project over there. You're going to pit against how well you're going to score against the rubric. So I just wanted to provide that. One of the things that we are hearing quite a bit, and this group right here, this working group and others around the state are doing something similar. We're going to try to figure out where can we have a better clearinghouse of what those other funding opportunities look like. Josh is aware of this. You know, we're building out our team to develop some toolkits around what those funding mechanisms are that perhaps have not been as utilized as they could be, and really helping to take that out on the road for folks who aren't familiar with it or how to use it. So that's an exercise that we're going to be engaging in also. So just wanted to kind of tag on with what Greg was saying, and he's absolutely right. 600 is not a lot, but we're always looking out ahead for where that funding was going to be, and use Catalyst to do just that. Get something up off the ground that perhaps has been languishing or needed a little extra to get it up and ready for implementation. Thanks, Josh.
Sorry, my dog there. Okay, Layla.
Thank you. Josh, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think it's always helpful to repeat this sort of thing when we're still socializing a possibility. So what Greg pointed out is something that I recall we started to discuss at the HRTC level middle of last year. And is in fact, as Susan pointed out, the reason for the creation of this Economic Development Finance Working Group. I'm going to add two things onto that that some of you have heard me say before. But first, Greg, I owe you an apology. You should have been invited, and I brain flubbed and did not invite you. I thought it would be useful to start a conversation last week among various agencies that are involved in one way or another in facilitating community partners' access to public funding, to see where we overlap, where we want to perhaps share information or coordinate, and to potentially, and this might be a long shot, but you know, there is a California endowment grant that AEDC and Humboldt Area Foundation are finishing out this year to see what a CDFI community foundation and other partners can do. Could we have a view that brings us to the end of the SURF process of California Jobs First, understanding that we were never going to have mobilized enough dollars either for pre-development or catalyst funding or for implementation solely through California Jobs First, that we always anticipated helping our community projects to identify more comprehensively their capital stacks, maybe even finding sources of technical assistance if that's what they needed. And maybe at some point at the end of this, we have a either a formalized institution, wouldn't have to be an EDD, it could simply be a nonprofit that is dedicated to continuing this kind of convening, helping set a neutral table for community projects that need to get planned out cross-sector and cross-region, helping people to tap and leverage various forms of capital, finding technical assistance and capacity building support, etc. Or this could be done informally or less formally through an MOA, where a certain number of institutions agree to collaborate on those kinds of activities and to contribute financially, intellectually, and otherwise, so that we sustain the momentum. I am not a fan of this whole once in a generation funding opportunity language, because so often the way that communities like ours tap those dollars is very much business as usual. But we could use it as a reason to create exactly the kind of leverage support that a region like ours often doesn't have. So you're going to hear me say this over and over again. And Greg, I apologize. We're going to meet again, and the next time you'll be invited if you want to come.
Thank you. And a good segue into the next section. I know there's some chat in the chat, which you can keep chatting, but just to work our way through the agenda, I want to keep this moving a little bit. So not exactly what you were just talking about, Layla, but certainly related is this piece that we are taking another swing at. If you recall, early in this effort, we wanted to we put out like a survey to understand capacity in the different organizations that were here. And what we have realized is that now, after having gone through some of the workshops and kind of level setting terms and ideas, that people may be more able to respond to a survey, a similar type survey that would aim to get us to a kind of a view like this. And these are just examples using the three organizations that I'm most connected with in this process. We want to be able to say, what organizations have experience with, develop basically a matrix that would say, okay, wait, well, I guess it's not AEDC anymore after tomorrow, but for today it's AEDC, has experience with tribal funding, and maybe CCRP also does. And so it could be sort of a searchable tool for organizations within the region that may want to identify partners or groups with certain expertise relative to both funding mechanisms, specific agencies, agency relationships, or specific processes that may have relevance to their project. So we're going to take another swing at sending out a little survey form and see if we can build our way towards a more, somewhat comprehensive view of that for the Redwood region. And this really is an idea that I think I'll give credit to Susan for bringing to our attention, and we met and discussed when we were up there a couple weeks back. So this is something that we'll be rolling out in the next couple of days, weeks, I would say, as far as the survey. And then just a note, we are working towards the end of our sort of phase one work, which really had, the intention of setting up this working group and gaining an understanding for ourselves and those who participated about, a capacity that exists in the region. So we're working to build that into a report, which we have well underway, and that will include some of the key findings and recommendations, as well as how we might evolve this process in a phase two effort. And so that's just underway. We'll be working that with Susan as our main point of contact, but I expect, that will be a useful resource, both to look at what we have done and what we have learned from this process. And we do have a couple meetings upcoming. The next one will be one of the expert sessions. And this one's focused on the role of philanthropy. And so so far we have Layla as one of the presenters, at Lee at CCRP, who has a long history in philanthropy in the region. I've also spoke with Jim Mayfield at the Mendocino Community Foundation, who will be able to offer perspective on what they're doing in the Mendocino. And then I have a thread going, working through Irvine and potentially to the California endowment folks to offer a little bit, bigger philanthropy voice in that. And I would see that as a series of 10-minute presentations with Q&A, wrapping to a final. But we're definitely still shaping it. So if you have thoughts or key people who you think could provide an expert voice, I think the number of 4 speakers would definitely get us through the time, but open to suggestion from you all on that. And then, our next regular meeting will be Wednesday, August 21st. And I did, through my email exchange on the back end with Calder, he has agreed to be the next sector table presenter at that meeting. So we'll hear from the arts, tourism, and culture strategy there, and then we'll kind of keep working our way through the I wonder if we still have Lacey or Bridget. No, is it who is the person from Fort Bragg who's in the renewable energy sector?
Lacey
Yeah.
Peterson.
Working with David Narum as well can provide an assist in the event that she can't make the time.
Okay. So we'll need to find somebody from the renewable sector table to do that. But I thought I knew Lacey was in there somewhere, and I saw Bridget Lacey, so apologize for that, Bridget. And so so that's kind of what's upcoming. And any questions or comments from that information?
Josh, this is actually a question for the group as a whole. A colleague called Katerina Oscarsson, who's the acting executive or the executive in residence for the Climate and Community Regional Hub, Core Hub, that operates out of the foundation. And I met with a guy who recently moved to Humboldt, and he happens to have a very strong background in climate finance and is working for an organization called the Climate Innovation Center. And he would be willing, if we're curious, to do one of these teach-ins at some point on the ways in which climate finance could be beneficial to tribal and rural communities.
Yeah, that sounds like a great topic. We are looking for the next expert sessions. I'll defer to Susan as the decider on that, but I think to my mind that would be a highly relevant and interesting subject. Susan?
Yeah, I think so too. And is he living up here now?
Yep, he lives in Myrtletown.
Yeah, well, maybe we need to get him involved in hearing part of our brain trust for the larger ongoing thing too. So if people have questions, we have him
Yeah.
in.
Well, I'm gonna be bringing him around to introduce him to you and Ross and Greg and others, so that you have him as a connection if you need him too.
Excellent. And then we have this much more information about the funding through the Clean Communities something accelerator, CCIA program, OFN and through the native net CDFI network, we have access
Investment accelerator, yeah.
to funding through both of those. So, you know, when we talk, we can find out, maybe we can both talk about projects that we have or opportunities that we have for funding. I definitely see that being a place where we can find outside funding for sure.
So the dates for that, maybe Abigail, while we're chatting here, you can put like what our upcoming expert session dates are. So you would later you might have that if you're talking to this person. And I know, Greg, you'll get the last word here, but I do have a thought, which is or a question really. You know, with the newsletter capabilities that the CCRP has developed through this process, in your communications with the region, are you including funding opportunities as a topic in those? So anytime you're getting information, you're sending that out, or at least with your newsletters, what the latest funding opportunities are.
We are, of course, we're selective, I guess, when people elevate the opportunities to us, or if they're easily recognizable as good opportunities. I would say we could use help vetting and elevating things that are, riper. So if that's yeah, absolutely. If there's something that you think needs to get out to the region. And we've also done some help, we've had people express interest to us, but saying, oh, I need to connect with a labor partner, or I need to connect with this type of partner to pursue this. And we've helped provide both technical assistance and also warm handoffs to potential grant partners. So these are all things we want to do more of. And so, yeah, elevate stuff to us and we'll move on it.
Okay, yeah, because it seems like that might be something we could start, adding in through this effort. We can certainly send you information and things like that. So, but it just seems like, because if we're talking about all these other funding opportunities, there are these live ones now, and will be. So I'll add that to our list. Okay, well, it's just about 5 minutes to 5. Greg, I said you'd get the last word. So do you have a last word?
That's so nice. Thank you. I actually put it in the chat. I would love to see a session later on underwriting in the land of reduced risk to lenders. I've seen situations over the years where the lenders either through SBA or state iBank or whatever, their risk is mitigated to the point where they'll make a loan that's probably too risky for the borrower. I've been doing lending a long time. I think that our first rule of lenders is the same as doctors: first, do no harm. And if we, and we can be guilty of this too, where we accept a certain amount of risk that we can handle, but that may not be good for the borrower. And I think with a lot of public sector borrowers or lenders, we need to be careful about pushing the string. And so I would just love to have that discussion about how we move money out. We don't do big projects here. I mean, we do big loans up to $1.5 million, but we're primarily an organization and individual business lender, and I think that's where we're going to stay for the time being. It's a niche that is large and more than we can handle, but I think it's really important for us not to lose sight of that.
Thank you for that. We, as noted, we are looking for topics for the expert sessions, and it seems like that's one that we have not really dove into. And I presume that Susan, although I can't see her, is eager to have this discussion to some degree, although I'm trying to interpret her smiles there. So maybe Susan, what do you think about this as a subject for our expert sessions?
I think we can talk about that.
Okay. we'll talk about that, but thank you for the suggestion, Greg, and we will talk about it. And anyone else who has subjects for the expert sessions, looks like we have through the end of the year 4 with the idea for a climate finance focus on one of those. And so we're looking for 3 sessions. So bring your ideas, send them to us, and I'll talk with Susan, Greg, and see if I can get her over the hump on that one.
Well, she
So,
calls the shots, so whatever works.
Susan's a boss.
Yeah.
So, hey, thank you all for hanging in there with us, and you know how to reach us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks, if not before. Role of philanthropy. Thank you.